All right, welcome to the Red Wheelbarrow Poetry Collective, everybody. Tonight we are joined by Sarah Lubala for a very special final reading of 2023. Sarah is a Congolese-born poet. She's twice been shortlisted for the Gerald Clark Award and once for the Brittle Paper Poetry Award, and has also been longlisted for the Sol Plaatje EU Poetry Award, and was the winner of the Castello di Duno bunch of Roman numerals that I can't on the spot say as a number prize. She's the author of A History of Disappearance, which was published by Botsotso in 2022. And yeah, this book has been on numerous to read, must read, should read, amazing kind of lists, and is just an incredible debut collection that everybody should definitely get their hands on. We are so thrilled to have you here, Sarah. Please, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I've been looking forward to this, and I really do hope my connection stays steady. I will be crossing fingers and toes and all such things. So I thought I would start with the first poem of the collection, and it's called 6 Errant Thoughts on Being a Refugee. 1. On the worst of my days, this body is a gimcrack vessel, no more than 2 lungs and a tremor, nailed to salvaged wood. 2. Grief traveled with me across the Ubangi River. I prayed love and all her cognates on the passage over. Libet, to please. Leaps, to be needed. Leap, to beg. I arrived with bruised knees, wet hair, a mouth full of salted fish. 3. I am so hungry, hungry, hungry for holiness, for communion, for a God you can sink your teeth into. 4. I was raised on the Congolese gospel. I can teach you how to forget where you are from, how to worship the wide road before you. Hands open, like this. Make each palm a letter to the sky. 5. Beni is a town with 1 police station, 1 airport, market, many graves. I should go back. My people are weeping. 6. Home is a narrow bed. Thank you. The next one I want to read, thanks Ed, is called Boy with the Flying Cheekbones. And it's the second poem in the collection, and there's about 3 that I wrote together that I'll read for you. Here goes. Dear Théophile, I imagine your bed still smells like burnt sugar and keen aching. I cannot cross the threshold. That room is steeped in a fever so ravenous, it devours the air. Lately, I've been thinking about all the hungers in men's chests because of something about absence and the heart growing fonder. Dear Théophile, you and I belong to the same bruised piece of earth. The rivers and anthems and old names are in you. Still, I smell the hot bread, the overripe mangoes, the filthy currency. Still, I feel the sweltering April sky, the villages aflame, the potholes like wounds in my side. Dear Théophile, where are you now? Where will this find you? How do I tell you your hands are scripture in full bloom? Each finger a slender verse. I knew nothing of such kindness. Mercy me. Though I have not seen them in years, I pray they can still make okra soup, ginger beer, wenge figurines, a fist, a plea. Theophi, of all the prayers, commit but one to memory. Me before you. Theophi, you bury me. Thank you. Okay, and here's the last one in that trio. It's called Portrait of a Girl at the Border Wall. All the women in my life are hungry. I have written this 100 times. I do not know how else to tell it. The girl by the roadside, the bruised peach, the narrow collar, the night full of birds. Her body is a long river that cuts through every room. See her in the kitchen. See her standing behind the gate. See how she cups her hands for soap, for bread, for sweet milk. Tell me, where do I put her? This girl pressed against the border. This girl swallowing her papers whole. This girl bird wailing through a fence. See her hands, holding the broken saucer, stitching the skirt's hem, cradling the last orange, begging the names of God. Where do I put her? Tell me what is owed. Here, the fist of hair. Here, the cut lip. Here, the legs, split like fruit. Who will take her? The sorrow of home girl, this river of bees girl, this night singing girl, this throat full of ghosts. Thank you. The next one I want to read is one of my favorites, and it's called A List of Things I Do Not Tell My Mother. Make sure I find it. Hey, I like to think of the black men in those shaving commercials. Foam glistening down their chins, throats you could practice hunger on. B, I don't pray the way the nuns taught us. I left my rosary in Uncle Palin's car on that trip to Kananga 3 years ago. I've only just remembered. C, there is skin more tender than daylight just behind the ear. I plant 2 kisses on the Indian girl I met on Tinder. Her laughter is clean water. D, love is not always the thick mouth of thunder. Sometimes it is living bread, a slow white dream rising in the light. E, my affliction is not quite insomnia. I'm only afraid to fall asleep. Always the same dream, always the dimly lit corridor, always the smell of fresh snow, always the hand in my shirt, always begging, begging. F, most days I hate to be touched. Every hand is my father's, you at the bottom of every staircase, a halo of blood around your neck. G, I want to write it. I never want to think of it again. The rabid years of girlhood, the chipping yellow paint, the house that held its breath. H, I think now I am a woman because I am terrified of my own body, what it makes men do. This next one is a longer one called Dispatch from Wardsea. On Tuesday you wake, walk the back stairs to find a bird, half dead and thrashing, stunned by its own purpose. You count the split wing, the muffled heart, smallest of all seeds. The corridors are the loudest, an archery of wailing. What nicks the heart, drawn tight across all things? I've known rage, the height of a woman. The cloying scent of relaxer holds the strongest memories. The sweet scabbing, the hairdresser's instructions. Let me know when it starts to burn. I think often of your world, the quotidian washing, the nightly mewling of the street cat, the sun-blind luck of ordinary days. My old roommate had a razor blade secreted in her bra. What had the years been to her? She read her Bible nightly, repeated the words, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. They are rules, no hookups. I dream of scarred fingers and stone-washed linen, summering at the window. How mere touch is abundance in the lack. The doctor asks if I know anything of intergenerational trauma. I think of my great-grandmother, 13 and wed, the chicken coop and red earth, the kneaded dough of girl limbs, a clutch of a doll in one arm, a baby in the other. They all want to know what I'll do when I'm out there. God with me, I'll die and I'll return. I'll wound and I'll be wounded. I'll swallow the white throat of fear. Thank you. I could do one or two more. I think we still have enough time. So the next one is called Stitch, and I wrote it at a time where gender-based violence was specifically on my mind, and it relates to the experiences of many women and the stories I was hearing at the time. It's called Stitch, and it starts with an excerpt from the American Psychiatric Association, DSM manual. Vaginismus, now termed genitopelvic pain or penetration disorder, is the involuntary contraction of the pelvic floor muscles. The tight muscle contractions make coitus and gynecological exams difficult or impossible. The cause is often linked to sexual trauma, and its definition has been expanded in light of new research and now incorporates pain, muscle tension, and fear of penetration. 1. This is how you burn your underwear so no witch can find it. She leans forward, bends into the bathtub. The thread is snagged, runs red along the seam. 2. Remember the sight of the mountains in that tiny apartment in Montreal. You're in her bathroom trying to use a tampon, slipping a spoon between the seed and fruit. You're breathing a needle through the wrong side of the fabric. 3. This is how he walks into the poem, in a place too narrow for speaking, where prayer is backed to the hilt. 4. For a long time after, you run at mirrors until you disappear, your pelvis thinning out, a knife tracing the scar, the fold so quick through the linen. Thank you. I'm going to read one that's a little more cheerful. It's called Honeymoon. I think it's one of maybe 3 love poems in the entire collection. Okay, Honeymoon. In l'île sur la Sorgue, Spring slips its bindings, and the island seems a girl who has never known grief. At the pâtisserie, the old woman gifts us a baguette. We share our luck with the birds. For days, we've moved like a long-held secret. When at last we are alone, it comes as a flight of swallows, our bodies hunting on the wing. This morning, I know what it means to find favor in God's sight. The years have broken my bones. Now my name rises from the grave. There is the fact of my illness. Days of a pain so large, the earth sounds with it. I finger each pill. It must be hard living in your head. Yes, my love, which is to say, I'm lonely. It is impossible to share a person's hunger, impossible to share another's pain. Tender and only beloved, show me how our bodies are hidden in each other. Say touch is the only way of knowing. Say we are kept for better days. Thank you.
Wow. Beautiful. Can we unmute and do a clap for Sarah?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It's gorgeous. Even the crickets are clapping. Mm. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm happy to say your connection was perfect throughout. So that's brilliant. Oh, just gorgeous hearing you read. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Now, if anyone doesn't already have the book, I'm sure you need to go buy it after this. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or anything you want to share or ask Sarah while we have the opportunity? You can raise your hand on Zoom or type it in the chat if you're shy, or put your camera on and wave around. Ed has got his hand up first.
Hey, Sarah. That was an absolute treat. Thank you. It's a long wait, but absolutely worth it. Yeah, I had a look at the book before the reading, and I was just struck by the visceral quality of many of the poems. And many of my favorite phrases, I think, are precisely those phrases. So I'm thinking of, if you'll excuse this, bees in the throat. The tongue is also a fire in the wet mouth of fear. I swallow the white throat of fear. And it's, there are others too. I loosen death's fist, one finger at a time. I mean, there's so many of them, but it's also interesting how many of them are tied to speech. And yeah, it's just one of the most striking things. And then the way the body is also brought in as a site of trauma, violence, things around gender. I'm becoming less and less articulate here, but there's a whole universe there, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, and the poems are more eloquent than I can sort of say. But I guess I did wonder about that visceral quality and whether that's just a feature of your writing, or yeah, if there's anything that you want to say about that, particularly bringing things back to the body, I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in writing this book, I was thinking a lot about how trauma lives in the body, and thinking about what we inherit in our genes and the way in which trauma literally affects and changes our genes. But also, for me, writing has always been about telling the story sitting on my throat. So throat imagery is very strong, and you notice a number of lines, because it felt very much like I was working through things sitting on my throat. It's the only way I can describe it. And I was working to dislodge that, and the only way I could is to tell these stories and the truth of them. But then I also think about, for me, so much of the work of poetry is about breath and breathing. It's a I'm always struck by the image of, bodies breathing in proximity to one another and what that does. And I think of the world or civilization as humans doing that together. And that's an image and an idea that's always struck me. And in that way, for me, writing poetry and reading poetry is an incredibly important trauma-informed kind of somatic practice that reminds me to breathe and be in the body and heal through the body. So thank you for all those things you said and noticed.
Well, thank you for your answer. I mean, well, thank you. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for starting that off, Ed. I am going to head over to Jacques next.
Hello, Sarah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Oh, fantastic reading. Thank you. I'm also curious about the breath, and how you experience, why the breath is important when you're reading, when you write, and you read your poems exceptionally well. But what I wanted to ask is about the hunger, because hunger for me is such a when it clearly refers to the hunger of people who just don't have food because they've been uprooted and dispossessed in some way. But there's also a metaphysical, a spiritual hunger there, a hunger for poetry, for life, for love, for many things. I wonder if you want to say something about that, because it's the one word that it runs like a thread through the poems you read tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent a lot of time thinking about hunger, both in the literal sense, in terms of, so much of this book is about my familial history as a person who's from the DRC and then left and had that kind of connection broken, and trying to retrieve some sense of that history. And a lot of that history for my parents especially is one of literal deprivation. My dad would tell me stories about how he was 11 and homeless and spent time trying to hunt field mice to kind of eat off of. So hunger and the way it affects the mind and body and one's humanity is a question and an idea that I was really grappling with. But also I think about the different hungers, both primal and not, both the ways in which it can be incredibly destructive, the ways in which it's incredibly tied to just our human nature and our desire for and our wantings. So I took a lot of time to explore the ways in which different hungers manifest themselves and what they make us do or others do to us. And it was really helpful for me to explore. I'm just going to quickly turn on the light out here because I feel like I'm disappearing. If you give me just 1 second. I'll be right back. Let me quickly do that. Okay, I just didn't want to completely disappear. Yeah, I hope that answers some of what you were saying, Jacques. But thank you for noticing that.
Absolutely, the wonderful answer. I'll feel into it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacques. Okay, so I've got some questions. Has anybody else got some? I will ask mine while you think about yours. I think I've got 2 questions. The one is, the collection feels so complete and like each poem fits in it. And I'm curious about the process in creating it as a collection. Is it something that happened organically, that you had the poems and they fit, or that you set out to explore these themes of hunger and, disappearance and family and trauma and all of that you were writing into the collection rather than having a collection already existing?
I definitely didn't have a collection already existing. The collection kind of came about because the first three poems I read, I'd submitted for the first time to Botsotso, and one of the editors, Alan, under the kind of comment was like, "Oh, these are great. Could you send me like a couple more?" And I was like, "I have exactly 5 poems, so I do not have a couple more." And he was incredibly patient and interested, and kind of gave me all the time to write more. And I mean, this collection, while very slim, took 5 years to write. And every year I kept thinking, surely by now he's going to be like, okay, this is not worth it. But he just believed in what I had to say and understood that what I wanted to explore had its own timing. And these weren't poems or stories that I could rush, really. So I think the fact that they all fit together probably also has something to do with trying to piece together my history. So they all center around it. And by mine, I mean that of my family, that of the country I'm from, and trying to explore those kind of questions and my own identity. I always think of this book as it is, on one hand, about things that have disappeared, but also about the things that you find. And a lot of it was about finding me. Yeah.
Amazing. That's beautiful and wonderful to have someone who believes in you, that you could set out on this journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my other question is, a lot of your poems, you do quite a few like list poems or numbered poems. And then also some of the like longer pieces, even where you don't have numbers specifically, you can feel almost that there's little parts, but they all kind of connect. And I find the way you transition between them, it really works. Sometimes poems like that can feel a bit disjointed, or like someone's just forcing them to be a poem, but they actually shouldn't be, or something. And yeah, I just wondered if you want to speak on that as a form that clearly you enjoy working with, and yeah, any tips for people maybe trying to approach them.
So I'm obsessed with lists. I don't know if it's like my type A personality, but also when I was writing these poems, so much of them came to me in scenes. So in some ways it made sense to kind of break them down into parts. It wasn't an intentional kind of form. It's sort of just as how they came to me. And I often think about the kind of how much you can fit in a list, right? I think often we think of them as quite like expedient, but I really wanted to capture the richness of a kind of emotional experience within the kind of tight constraints of a list. And I found that it was, for me anyway, writing it meant that there was a certain kind of potency in each part that I don't know if it had been possible if I did it any other way. But also it's how it came to me, so I don't know if I could have written it any other way. But I do think it can be a really, I don't know, I mean, I encourage people to play with different forms, and I think it can be really interesting to see what happens when you're strict about the form and not the content, what it kind of pulls out of you and forces out. And there's something there about the kind of power of it that I really enjoyed.
Amazing, thank you. And Francis has also got a hand up.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you so much. Sorry, my camera is not working. Thank you so much for reading for us the poem this evening. I like your poems. I always like them. Myself being from Congo, Congolese born as well. So every time when I go through your poems, I always like them. I get inspired. So my question is just for the first poem that you read. It really attracted me particularly. I don't know why. Please tell me what inspired you to write that first poem, the one that you just read, the very first poem you read for us tonight. What inspired you to write that particular poem?
Sure. Yeah, 6 Erin Thoughts on Being a Refugee. Gosh, this could be answered so many ways, but I suppose the biggest one is that I was trying to make sense of the experience of myself and my family who did arrive here as refugees, but also the stories of the people around me, because you become kind of part of a community. And the thing I often say to people about being a refugee is, even now, right, I'm a citizen and I have kind of all the formal papers, etc., but you're never not that. It's something that stays with you as an experience. And it was I wrote it first because it was my first attempt at exploring that history and what it means to be dislocated in that way. And I wanted to talk a bit about this land I'd left behind when I was really little and didn't really remember, but only knew about through stories of others. And a lot of it had to do with the parts of the country where my family's from. I think the other aspect of it too is all the kind of narratives I was reading at the time about the Congo, and I was trying to learn more about my own country, were all incredibly, something blood river, blood this, blood river that, blood that. It was all, the kind of Christology, war, poverty, porn stuff that it felt like it was trying to sell me a particular idea of the Congo, and I wanted to explore it for myself and understand that connection for myself, and to give a sense of humanity and dignity back to people who are forced migrants, that they are more than just headlines or some kind of disaster story you read by some, I don't know, British guy who went there once for a month and decided he was going to write some war book about it. So it's really also about humanizing this idea we have of refugees and understanding that they are people who deserve their dignity.
Awesome. Thank you
I hope
so
that
much.
answers that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Awesome.
Thank you, Francis. Okay, Ed, another hand from you. Hi.
Yeah, I feel like I'm trying to squeeze in a whole lot of things here. So one of the things I was struck by were the love poems, and some of the poems towards the end, they're just beautiful. They throw the other poems into relief, and vice versa. There's just a so I love those. And yeah, sorry, so random thoughts popping into my head here. I think one of the things that makes the book really powerful for me is that there are two things happening with a history of disappearance. You've got by retracing trauma, loss, dislocation. You said disappearance. There's simultaneously, reappraisal, reclamation. Salvaging, but there's also a sense at the end that there are still a lot of questions, that even though language is amazing, what one can do in poetry is amazing, there are questions that remain. And there's the notion in the book as well of language as a kind of haunting, being haunted by the past, by the selves one was. So all of this to sort of ask, do you have a sense of where to next? Or if that's not a question you want to answer, I mean, like, why answer that? It's a tricky thing to answer. And I wondered if you wanted to read the very last poem in the collection, because it speaks to some of the things I'm talking about.
Okay, maybe I can read the last one and then I will respond to some of what you've said. Okay. So this last poem is called Desertion, and it begins with an excerpt or a quote by James Baldwin that reads, "How do you live if you can't love? And how can you live if you do? Sometimes I dream you're already gone. I wander through your leaving, broken-necked in the arms of its shadow, heartsick and delirious, widowed before your death. You say love, that a trap door opens, inexorable and ravenous. In the wet mouth of fear, I dare not say the word out loud. I dare not think it. I've grown tired of walking with a knife in my hand, but this string of kin going or gone circles a long road. They pass through me and hound me. They bang on the windows when I am asleep. They tap at the door. I'd trade these desertions for anything. Tattered clothing, the last scrap of day, a stone, thin smoke. I am a soft animal, only a shudder of a girl braced against all the ways I can be hurt. To love is to confess the need of it, and I do. But I cannot be my mother, faithful to her torturer, begging for a crust of bread. We don't belong to each other. I belong to the alphabet of everything, to the valley of vowels, to myself. Thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of where to next, well, right now I'm kind of writing I guess a genre-less or genre-bending memoir of sorts. I'm looking into this question of inheritance, and it's in fact a poem in the book. And I'm trying to explore more this question of what we inherit and what we do with what we inherit, and what does it, are the things we inherit something that we can decide to keep? Do we have some agency about what we keep in return? And whose inheritance is it? So that's what I'm exploring right now.
Wow. Thank you.
Thank you. A bonus poem. That was gorgeous. Do we have anybody else who wants to ask or say anything before we close off this part of the evening? No last minute takers? Looks like not. You're off the hook. We all left stunned by the last poem. Yeah. Mary.
Oh, Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Yeah, you've just said the words, Melissa, that it was stunning. That made me speechless, really. I will get the book and read it, and I'm hungry for it. It was really fantastic. Yeah. So, gosh, you speak for a lot of us. Yeah. Thank you.
Much. Thank you. That means so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. All right, then I think I'm going to wrap up this part. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing yourself and your journey and your words with us. It's a delight and a real treat to get to hear you speak your beautiful words, because you speak them so beautifully too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all of you who attended and asked questions, and were just, yeah, thank you for being here.